In April 2006, a hunter in the Canadian Arctic shot what he believed was a polar bear. The animal had the white fur he expected, but something was wrong. Its back had a distinctive hump. Its claws were unusually long and curved. Its face was flatter than any polar bear he had ever seen. When DNA testing confirmed the truth, it sent shockwaves through the scientific community. The bear was half polar bear and half grizzly, a hybrid that scientists had theorized might exist but had never confirmed in the wild. They called it a growler bear. Others called it a pizzly, and its existence raised a question that nobody had seriously asked before. In a world where the Arctic is warming 4 times faster than the global average, what happens when the planet's largest land carnivore and one of its most aggressive predators are forced to share the same shrinking landscape? This is not the story most people expect when they think about polar bears and grizzly bears. It is not a story about which one would win a fight. It is a story about 2 animals separated by 500,000 years of independent evolution and thousands of miles of geography, whose worlds are literally colliding because of what humans have done to the climate of the planet they share with us. Today, WildForge explores every dimension of the relationship between the polar bear and the grizzly bear, what makes them different, what makes them unexpectedly similar, and what their converging worlds tell us about the speed and consequences of planetary change. The story of the polar bear and the grizzly bear begins not as a story of 2 separate animals, but as a story of 1 animal becoming 2. A recent evolutionary split that left both species close enough to interbreed but different. Enough that for hundreds of thousands of years they never needed to. The grizzly bear, Ursus arctos horribilis, is a subspecies of the brown bear, the most widely distributed bear species on Earth, found from the forests of Spain and Scandinavia, across Russia and Asia, to the mountains and forests of North America. In North America, the brown bear exists as several regional populations: the inland grizzly of the Rockies and Cascades, the larger coastal brown bear of Alaska, and the enormous Kodiak bear of the Kodiak archipelago. What we commonly call the grizzly bear, characterized by the prominent muscular shoulder hump, the dished facial profile, and the long front claws, is the inland North American subspecies, shaped over long evolutionary history to thrive in a world of seasonal abundance and scarcity. The polar bear, Ursus maritimus, split from the brown bear lineage between 400,000 and 500,000 years ago, a geological eye blink in evolutionary terms. Polar Bears International notes that the best available evidence from recent genetic research suggests this divergence occurred approximately 500,000 years ago, though earlier studies had placed the split more recently. In less than 500,000 years, evolution transformed a brown bear population into a species so specialized for life on Arctic sea ice that it can no longer survive without it. Polar bear fur appears white, but is actually transparent. Each hollow guard hair scatters light to appear white, providing camouflage against snow and ice. The polar bear's skull is elongated and narrowed compared to the grizzly's broader skull, an adaptation for reaching into seal breeding holes. Its paws are enormous, partially webbed and roughened on the undersole with small papillae that grip ice. And its entire metabolism is built around a diet that is approximately 90% fat and protein from marine mammals, an extreme dietary specialization that has no parallel among land carnivores of comparable size. The closeness of the 2 species, separated by a relatively brief period of independent evolution, means that their chromosomes are sufficiently similar to allow fertile hybrid offspring. This is unusual among distinct species. And it is this biological proximity, combined with the geographic changes now being driven by climate change, that is making their historical separation impossible to maintain. Despite their shared ancestry, The polar bear and the grizzly bear have diverged dramatically in their physical characteristics, each shaped by the specific demands of a very different world. The polar bear is the larger of the two on average. Male polar bears typically weigh between 600 and 1,200 pounds, with the largest males reaching up to 1,700 pounds. They measure between 8 and 10 feet in length. The most extreme record, an individual shot in 1960, reportedly weighed 2,209 pounds, though such exceptional individuals are extremely rare. The polar bear's body is built for cold. A layer of fat, up to 4.5 inches thick beneath the skin, provides insulation in temperatures that regularly reach minus 50 degrees Fahrenheit. The neck is proportionally longer than the grizzly's, allowing the polar bear to reach into seal-breathing holes and under ice. The ears are smaller, reducing heat loss. The paws are enormous. A front paw can measure 12 inches across and serve double duty as paddles in water and snowshoes on ice. The grizzly bear is notably smaller than the polar bear on average. Adult male grizzlies in the lower 48 states weigh between 200 and 700 pounds, with females weighing considerably less. Coastal brown bears and Kodiak bears, which have access to protein-rich salmon runs, can grow considerably larger. Kodiak males regularly exceed 1,000 pounds and occasionally match polar bears in size. The inland grizzly's most distinctive physical features are its prominent muscular shoulder hump, a mass of muscle used for digging its dished or concave facial profile, its shorter and more rounded ears compared to black bears, and its long front claws, which can reach 4 inches in length and are designed for digging roots, excavating ground squirrels, and turning over rocks. While the polar bear's claws are shorter and more curved for gripping ice, the grizzly's long, straight digging claws reflect a completely different relationship with the ground beneath its feet. The two bears also differ significantly in their relationship with water. The polar bear is classified as a marine mammal. It spends large portions of its life on sea ice and in open water, and individual polar bears have been documented swimming hundreds of miles between ice floes. The grizzly swims competently but is fundamentally a terrestrial animal. For hundreds of thousands of years after their evolutionary divergence, the polar bear and the grizzly occupied such fundamentally different ecosystems that contact between them was essentially impossible. The Arctic and the boreal forest and alpine terrain of the grizzly's range were separated not just by distance, but by a profound ecological barrier, the tree line beyond which grizzlies did not venture and polar bears had no reason to go. The polar bear's entire existence, its ability to hunt, to travel, to breed, and to survive the Arctic winter depends on the formation and persistence of sea ice across the Arctic Ocean and its peripheral seas. The polar bear's primary prey, the ring seal, is hunted almost exclusively at the sea ice edge and at seal breeding holes in the ice surface. Without sea ice, the polar bear cannot hunt seals. Without seals, the polar bear starves. This dependency is absolute and has no parallel in the terrestrial world the grizzly inhabits. The grizzly's ecosystem is one of seasonal extremes and dietary diversity. In spring, it emerges from hibernation to eat winter-killed carcasses, early green vegetation, and ground squirrels. In summer, it eats berries, roots, insects, and fish, particularly salmon in coastal areas. In autumn, it enters a state of hyperphagia, consuming up to 20,000 calories per day to build the fat reserves needed for winter hibernation. The grizzly does not depend on any single prey species or any single habitat feature, the way the polar bear depends on sea ice. This dietary flexibility and habitat tolerance is the grizzly's greatest survival advantage and the quality most starkly absent in its Arctic cousin. The Arctic is warming at approximately 4 times the rate of the global average, a phenomenon scientists call Arctic amplification. The consequences for sea ice are documented and severe. Since reliable satellite records began in 1979, the Arctic has lost approximately 13% of its sea ice extent per decade. The summer minimum sea ice extent, the amount of ice remaining at the end of each melt season, has declined dramatically. Multi-year ice, which is thicker and more stable than seasonal ice, has been almost entirely replaced by thinner, younger ice that melts more easily. For the polar bear, this is not a future threat, it is a present crisis. As sea ice forms later in autumn and breaks up earlier in spring, polar bears are being forced onto land for longer periods without access to their seal prey. Body condition assessments of polar bear populations in Hudson Bay, one of the most intensively studied populations, have documented significant declines in average body weight and reproductive success over the past 3 decades, directly correlated with the reduction in time bears spent on sea ice. For the grizzly, the same warming is producing the opposite movement. As temperatures rise, the tree line is moving north. Vegetation is appearing in areas that were previously bare tundra. Ground squirrels, a key grizzly prey species, are establishing populations further north than they have historically occurred. And grizzly bears are following these expanding food resources into territories they have not occupied in historical times, territories that are also home to polar bears spending more time on land. The first confirmed wild growler bear was identified in 2006 in the Canadian Arctic, when Jim Martell, an Idaho hunter, shot what appeared to be a polar bear, but which had physical traits of both species. A 2024 genome analysis of over 800 polar bears and grizzly bears confirmed only 8 known wild hybrid growler bears, all descending from a single female polar bear and multiple male grizzly bears. Despite occasional speculation that these hybrids might be better adapted to the changing Arctic, the scientific consensus is clear. As polar bears international states, hybrids likely make for poor brown bears and poor polar bears. Their mix of physiology, coat color, dentition, and behavior is not well suited to either a terrestrial or marine existence. The grizzly bear is not a solution to climate change, it is a symptom of it. The behavioral differences between the polar bear and the grizzly reflect the demands of their respective environments as clearly as their physical differences do. The polar bear is among the most patient hunters on Earth. A polar bear may wait motionlessly at a seal breathing hole for hours, sometimes longer than a day, waiting for a seal to surface to breathe. This still hunting technique requires a level of motionless patience that is almost unparalleled among large mammals. When the seal appears, the polar bear strikes with explosive speed, hooking the animal with its front paws and hauling it onto the ice in a single violent motion. The polar bear has also been documented stalking seals by swimming underwater and approaching from below, using the glare of the sky to conceal its approach when seen from below. The grizzly, by contrast, is a dynamic and versatile forager rather than a specialized hunter. It uses its powerful front limbs and long digging claws to excavate rodents from burrows, turn over rocks for insects, and dig up plant roots. It ambushes large ungulates, including elk and moose, typically targeting calves or animals weakened by winter. And in ecosystems with salmon runs, it becomes a masterful fisher, standing in river shallows or at waterfall bases and catching salmon with its paws or mouth as they leap upstream. The grizzly's hunting success depends on strength, speed, and opportunism qualities very different from the polar bear's patience and specialization. The polar bear's aggression toward other polar bears is primarily mediated by sea ice geography and food distribution. Grizzlies establish and defend territories more actively, particularly females with cubs who aggressively defend against male grizzlies, who represent a significant predation threat to cubs. The conservation situations of the polar bear and the grizzly bear diverge as dramatically as their habitats. The polar bear is listed as vulnerable on the IUCN Red List, with a global population estimated at approximately 26,000 individuals across 20 recognized subpopulations, a number updated by the IUCN Polar Bear Specialist Group in 2024, which also formally recognized a 20th subpopulation in Southeast Greenland. Of these subpopulations, several are declining, some are stable, and several have insufficient data for reliable assessment. The trajectory is clear. As sea ice continues to decline, polar bear populations will face increasing food stress, reduced reproductive success, and eventual population decline across much of their range. Climate projections suggest that if current warming trends continue, polar bears could face near complete loss of summer sea ice within decades, a scenario that would make survival impossible for most populations. The grizzly bear occupies a very different conservation position. In the lower 48 states of the US, the grizzly was nearly extirpated by the mid-20th century, reduced from an estimated pre-European population of 50,000 to fewer than 1,000 individuals. Protection under the Endangered Species Act since 1975 has allowed the Greater Yellowstone ecosystem population to recover to approximately 1,000 individuals. And the Northern Continental Divide ecosystem population has also grown substantially. In Alaska and Canada, grizzly populations remain robust. Alaska alone is estimated to have approximately 30,000 brown bears. The grizzly is a conservation success story in many respects, a demonstration that large predators can recover when given legal protection and sufficient habitat. The irony of the climate crisis is that as it threatens the polar bear, it simultaneously benefits the grizzly, expanding its range northward into ecosystems previously beyond its reach. The collision of these two worlds is not a natural event. It is the consequence of a century of fossil fuel combustion reshaping the thermal balance of the planet. The polar bear and the grizzly bear are not rivals in the way that predators of the same prey are rivals. They are cousins separated by 500,000 years of independent evolution in opposite directions, one toward the ultimate cold, one toward seasonal versatility. For most of their separate histories, they had no reason to encounter each other. The Arctic and the boreal forest were different enough worlds that the question of what happens when they meet was purely theoretical. Climate change has made it a practical question. And the answer? 8 hybrid bears in the wild, grizzlies appearing in Arctic coastal areas, polar bears spending unprecedented time on land, is already being written in real time. The polar bear did not become the world's largest land carnivore by accident. It took 500,000 years of selection pressure, evolutionary refinement, and Arctic specialization to produce an animal perfectly suited to a world of ice and seals. That world is shrinking, and no hybrid, however biologically interesting, can replace what is being lost. The grizzly, meanwhile, demonstrates what biological flexibility looks like in an animal that can eat almost anything, live almost anywhere north of the subtropics, and adapt to landscapes that change around it. It is thriving precisely because it never became as specialized as its Arctic cousin. Both bears are magnificent, both are irreplaceable, and both remind us that evolution moves on geological timescales, while climate change moves on human ones, and that the gap between those two speeds is where extinction happens. Thank you for watching.